the regional director of Eurasia. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Srinath.
Thanks, George, and congratulations once again on your very important milestone in life. And it's wonderful to meet all of you. And thank you for the invitation, for your kind gesture. I've been following your work from distance and, of course, appreciating them. And I see a lot of the beneficiaries of the work that you've put in over the years. Some of you have been there for several decades, and you've had that impact on young people living in this part of the world, Americans, and some people who are local as well, who get attracted to your scout groups, which come under TAC. You're doing a brilliant job supporting all of them, extending the high quality youth program that you have in training across the Atlantic into these regions and all over the world. I mean, international scouting in BSA, I have studied it very early in my work life in the World Scouts Bureau. When I started off in 2005 in Geneva, I was in charge of scouting for marginalized groups, and one of the ways that you can get marginalized is when you get alienated from your home country, and you've kept all the Americans integrated around the world with easily the most valuable youth organization of the country, despite some turbulence that we're all going through. And that is really significant now that all of you are also there here in this group with the experience that you have to continue the support. So I will give a short introduction to myself. I'm from India. I did my younger scouting days in India, and I was in the Asia Pacific regional level at some stage. While I was still young, I was the chairman of the Youth Forum for Asia as a volunteer, and I was in the Youth Program Committee of the Asia Pacific region. And that was when I was hunted by my then boss. Dominique Benard is a French guy. He was the Deputy Secretary General of WASL. And I started off working on scouting for marginalized communities, disabled children, street children, and child prostitutes, child soldiers, etc. And also LGBT community. It was very, very new. It was so difficult to even put my head around how to talk about it, some of these things, you know, and we really found our way and looked at good examples. And since then, I've worked in different areas, in different parts of the world for the Bureau. I did 5 years in Switzerland, during which I also took on spiritual and religious development and scouting under the Educational Methods, Education, Research and Development Department, where I started off. And then I subsequently got posted in Kenya, Africa, where I took over responsibilities on organization development for that continent. That was in 2010, and I was there for a couple of years. Then I was called back on duty to Geneva to take over a totally different area of work. And I was also working on child protection and safety in scouting. And I benefited largely from the work that you had done in youth protection. Almost all of what you see in WASM today was inspired by a box that was sent by, I forget the doctor, a dentist who was in our educational methods team, a wonderful personality from BSA. And he sent me that box and with all the videotapes and all the CDs and all your materials, written materials. And using that, we put the first ever child protection training together in the UK Jamboree in 2007. So you can take a lot of pride in having influenced what we do today in World Scouting coming out of BSA. So I came back to Geneva and worked in communications and external relations. I became the director for the organization's comms and external relations and partnerships. I was busily working in the UN and all we created a new website, got some attention, and then what Josh was saying, then we moved our office to Kuala Lumpur at some stage. And at that time, I took over a new role heading the Office of the Secretary General. I was the administrative director first, and then I became the executive director, or the equivalent of chief of staff. I left the bureau, went to work for a tech startup, but very short-lived in India. I wanted to go back home, and my wife is Italian, and I have an 8-year-old daughter, and I wanted them to experience India. We had never lived there, but they stayed there. But I came to Ukraine for a 6-month support in an interim phase when a major transition was brought after a prolonged crisis in this region in scouting. And subsequently, I was asked to take over as the regional director. So that's my story, and I'm here today to share with you as to how we are managing the transition in a very complex setup, as you all know, in the former Soviet countries. And you would also see how some of our problems lie in our own way of handling things at the very beginning when we integrated these countries into scouting, in World Scouting. So I'll stop at that for a moment, and I want to recognize and thank all of you, each one of you, Jeff, James, Greg, Dean, and Tom. Your backgrounds are very, very bright in different parts of the world setting, and Josh, yourself, excellent leadership and initiative taking in this work. And I know that we've been trying to get onto the WB course, Wood Badge course, to help our region to be inspired. You will see now in my brief presentation that we have moved forward with that because the COVID pandemic gave us an opportunity to use the time that people were stuck indoors to do a lot of inner work and prepare for change. So I will take you through the key pillars of our strategy. But before going there, I wanted to tell you that when I took over this job in June 2018, the World Scout Committee had suspended the plan of the region, saying that membership is declining in this region, and it is anyway it has been very marginal. And they sent out a research team to each and every country in our region to understand what was going wrong, and figured out that the scouting fundamentals were missing. Meaning there was no, and this is something that the World Committee has even reported to all the countries, so it's public, and I will share that in a candid way with you, as we are all one family, and we need to support each other, and Eurasian countries need that guidance and support from everybody to rub shoulders with strong scout movements around the world, such as the Boy Scouts of America. So what happened is we realized that they were all mostly hollow organizations without a real movement underpinning these NSOs, or what we call the National Scout Organization. So meaning they were doing all the compliance requirements, general assemblies, they had national boards, and they would submit reports, but they had a few hundred scouts in each of the countries because they never met every week. They didn't have any youth program to run an activity. They would do annual summer camps, and that was all. In some countries, groups were meeting and formed thanks to support from partner organizations in the European region, particularly, who had moved. And a lot of them were even seen as bizarre people by the national organizations, and some of them got alienated. And they have been running scouting on their own, these people who have been running real scouting. And some of them have got disgruntled and left the organization and have been on their own. And this has happened in many countries, not just in one or two. So how do you, bring change in such a situation, where all of these people are recognized member organizations involved? I give a metaphor to that. It's an analogy would be that you have a car that is running, and suddenly you realize there are fundamental problems in this, but you're not able to stop the car while it is running. You need to put the spanner in the wheel and try to make some changes. So that's how challenging it is here for organizations that are, in their name, the leading youth organizations in their country. Some of them have been challenged, and they have other organizations which have overtaken them. But most of them, because organized activities and community engagement has been so poor and limited in Soviet countries, we have not had people challenging us. But these organizations, to tell them that you don't have a youth program, you don't have any adult training, and that is why you don't have an impact on children, they are not seeing the transformation, and hence the movement is not growing, is a very, very difficult news to give. It is like telling somebody who's been doing a lot of things that suddenly that you're not alive, you're actually dead, you're just in your sleep dreaming of things. So that is how terrible it was. And we had to really work with them to build their self-belief, because we can't work against them. These are our organizations. How do you build that self-belief, yet having already given them the bad news? And we also saw that some of the countries had governance issues. And obviously, as you see, when scouting is not very good at the grassroots level, some of the national leadership reflects that, and it gets hijacked by individuals with other interests and agendas. And that has become, governance challenges in some of these NSOs as well. So these are the three main problems that the World Committee found out. and suspended operations and brought me in on an interim period to try and make sense of what we need to do here to change things. So when I came in, I said, I took a lot of time to people and read and understand. And I also had the experience of being a desk officer for Eurasia for a few years, which is when I got a hint about this. And I raised the red flag before I left World Scouting. I had raised the red flag very politely to the regional director then, who was a very close friend of mine, and the regional chairperson and the regional committee, and then went on to tell that to the Secretary General and to my colleagues in Geneva and Kuala Lumpur, asking them to set up emergency support. And they started doing things. But it was not until 2018 that we found the real magnitude of the challenge. So you can't brood about it for long. So when I came in, I had a very slim team. Some of the people had left and changed by the leadership as well to bring in, this transformation. And the strategy and plan was suspended. So we had to operate from ground zero. And I also had to do some more fact finding to find out what really the people themselves feel and say. One thing is what we have an opinion about them, but what are the people saying? And I started learning Russian. It took a while, but until then I managed with interpretation. And it helped me that I had a reputation already in the region. Everybody respected me. So when I challenged them, they didn't take it wrongly. And most of them cooperated very well, and they still do. And the work that has happened in the last 3-4 years is real agriculture, getting your hands dirty and actually doing the work. And when they see that, the respect only increases and collaboration becomes better. So in this effort, what we have done is gone to basics and worked with them in parallel, sat with them and done the work ourselves. So what have we done? And I'll take you through a little presentation to share about what we've done. But before that, if you have any questions or any comments at this stage, or anything that you'd like to share, any thoughts that came up in your mind, and take a break to drink a little water. Cheers. I see that you've given me right to share, and I see no comments coming up. So I'll move to the presentation if that's okay. Josh, do I see a thumbs up from you? Can I go ahead? Thank you. So here's what we did in this region. This is a presentation that I made to all our NSOs that my team made a week ago when we had the World Conference. I'm using the same presentation, modified a little bit and targeted at you. But pardon me if it appears a little too detailed for you. Sharing is paused, it says. Let me resume sharing. Can you see my presentation? No? You do. Now because this flag, when it says sharing is paused, it doesn't bode well. Like I will try to move, and then you see, do you see the next slide? Does it say youth program? No, it doesn't. So let's restart again. Okay, that needs to change. Let us see. Okay, it seems to be working now. So I will try to change the slide. Now, do you see youth program there?
We do, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I see all of you as well on the side. We were given 3 major issues, right? And initially, when there is a crisis, you can't put in place a strategy immediately. You need to do emergency response first. So what I did is I put together for lack of a better term, I'd say an A team together to form a chairman of the World Committee, Joao Armando, and a couple of trainers who had the time and who knew the problem, gravity of the problem, who were all wood badge holders, one from Finland, one from Singapore, because Eurasia politics, because they have now already been part of the European region. I'm right now transiting in an airport, so it says my internet connection is unstable. So if you see the background which says Kiev is fake, I'm a digital nomad, as the new definition goes. Keep working while traveling, but it seems to be okay. So if you can't hear me, make some frantic signals, and I'll know if the internet is good enough to tell me. And so what I was trying to say is that we couldn't put in place a serious plan or any structured mechanism institutionalizing that very early. So we went on a second road trip here with well-meaning people, and we took it like any Christian missionary would have done. We went on the road, called everybody who's interested, and spoke about shared stories, asked them to tell their stories. So we designed an ad hoc 2-day fundamentals workshop where we said, we'll share about what we know about these fundamentals and you tell us what you've been practicing. So we're just talking to each other. So no blame and shame going on there. It was so hard yet, and we went on this trip. We chose 4 most suitable of the entire lot because having such a massive problem and limited resources, you can't solve everything at a go. So we started with a pilot approach. We went to 4 most plausible national organizations where we knew people had some sort of commitment, or we assumed, we thought, because a lot of other things changed as we went along. So I was coming out of a startup in India, an artificial intelligence based startup, data harvesting startup, and all of that knowledge of working using design thinking and putting users first was brought in here, and I focused completely on listening and understanding their problems in a much deeper way before we made a plan. So that led to understanding, the root cause lied in our own house. When we launched these countries in the beginning, we were in a hurry to make them members. We were so excited and a little opportunistic probably that we ignored our own process of adding new members, to go through the checklist a little bit and to help them have a movement in place. And it also didn't seem easy because there was so much that had changed in the Soviet societies for the 70 years, that they had a different kind of a system of life. And a lot of these countries had very powerful scouting before that, during the Russian Empire and the Tsar's period, because he was a very big proponent of scouting, having experienced it in UK himself. And that had taken a hit in those 70 years, and somewhat our movement had gotten replicated or hijacked by the pioneer movement, which was basically a replica but attuned towards catering the propagandist approach of the party there. And that pioneer movement's legacy also meant that people were very wary of anything that looked like the pioneer movement, and we were everything that looked like it. So there's a lot of red flags and red signals. So spreading the movement was not going to be easy. Yet we were in a hurry, and we invested the organizations into the movement. And so the movement building never happened, almost all of these countries. They all became members. They came to events, and they had annual camps and ephemeral level of scouting. Some people wearing the badge. All of them believe in those values, but just because you wear a uniform, make a promise, attend a summer camp, you don't transform yourself as a young person in scouting. You don't become that person who can change the world. You need to go through the grind of all the activities in the youth program and under the guidance of trained adults who are able to allow for that growth and learning. And with that missing, we had to now understand how we can put that. And now coming back to the car analogy, it's moving at some speed. I need to put a spanner in, change the spanner, change the wheel, probably even make changes in the hot engine. So that's as challenging as it is, because people have huge resistance. They're already in some momentum. They don't like to do the things. They can hear you, they have the respect, but when it comes to the grind, it is not easy. So what we did is we said, we are not somebody who's commanding you, which was the usual approach in the past. The regional director and the regional office was command and control approach. So that's what was, familiar in this territory. And it worked for the organizations, but it won't work for the movement. You need to have all the elements that Baden Powell had in the very beginning for scouting, and Greg, having embodied him in several wood badge courses, will know how open-hearted he was and how humble and modest he was. He was a war hero, and yet he was learning all the time, even when this movement was spreading. So we adopted that kind of an approach and started working with them, whatever they needed. Startup approach, right? When you recognize a need, you build that. So we started doing that and kept a very agile management approach, not over investing on one idea, thinking this will work, but trying something out, testing it out, And if it's working, then invest more and make it work with one pilot and then spread it to the others. And bring them together to help learn from each other. So what we did in youth program, we basically wrote a new youth program because we need to also help them get a advantage, in terms of all the lost years, 30 years. How do you help them get a head start now? By giving them the best youth program that we can access in the world. And I had that opportunity because I had contacts and I've been in that area before I got into senior leadership of WOSM. So I dug up all of those. I put the really big team together. My own boss started to work for me, ex-boss, Dominic Benar, and started writing educational materials from the best of the world. We asked the best NSOs of the world to give their program materials, and we digested that and made it up to date to the newest youth program policy at the world level. Cutting edge youth program, and for the first time, did an official translation of that to Russian. It took a while, to write that together, but we kept working with the national organizations, already getting them ready for these things. And immediately after that was done, when your wood badge was supposed to happen in 2019, was it, or last year? Last year. I was supposed to use that opportunity to bring some of the people in from our countries to introduce them to the concept of wood badge. There was 0 people with wood badge in the region. So it was a land of the blind, right? So anybody who knew a little bit about program and training was the king. So we wanted to bring them to see what it is, a wood badge, to bring them to see Greg playing Baden Powell and to see what it means to go through the training and be of that quality at the end to deliver the scout method. But that didn't happen. So I had to put together a different plan, and we did a virtual plus it's a blended training where people got together in patrols. But somehow a little situation got to improve at the end of last summer. And in the beginning of October, end of September last year, we did this blended training after having done some pre-courses and warming them up for a couple of weeks with learning. And we brought them together in patrols and tried to deliver a wood badge training in that process. A couple of trainers coming together in Kandastag, live training others, one of them joining from Kuala Lumpur, all seasoned, leader trainers and 4-bead holders and directors of adults in training from WOSM. And they put together this training, and we had 3 countries over the last 6 months doing 2 wood badge courses in patrols, and they have gone and started doing the training, 2-bead training in their country. So this has been the long journey. So the details, I know that I've already taken sufficient time. I'll just whiz through the presentation, and if you want me to stop somewhere, let me know. So in youth program, I told you about the cutting edge materials. These are all things that were written by Dominic, who's the father of modern youth program. He's the one who wrote Renewed Approach to Programming, understood what it means to revise and review programs. He really is one of the few people who got together with somebody from Inter-America, Ricardo Gonzalez, to understand how to write what Baden Powell meant when he put together a program. So that those are the people who have come the closest to articulate it. And we got that into this much more revised, modern, up-to-date, today's youth trends and needs. So we are trying to support NSOs to adapt this. And at this moment, already I learned that a lot of people are moving away from Russian. They're investing on their own languages. So we said, no problem. We've already worked to do it in Russian, but you will translate it to your own language. So we helped them create a lexicon, a terminology, a glossary of 1,000 words, or 1,000 phrases of popular scouting ones in their own language first, based on the English, Russian, and French base that we had given them. And they created their own terminology and started to translate these materials in their own language. It has now been translated into at least 5 languages in our region: Georgian, Armenian, Azerbaijani, Ukrainian, and Romanian in Moldova. So, and we will have newer countries coming in, Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan. They will also translate it to their own language. So the next thing is, so we created a model package of the youth program so that people could, directly consume them. It wasn't that straightforward when they used it. So we made handbooks for each of the age sections for young people as well, so that young people who haven't had this knowledge got this document that they can follow through their progressive scheme for 4 age sections: Cubs, Scouts, Ventures, and Rovers. so that gives a journey of how they go through everything. This is not really highly recommended because we want young people to do it on their own creativity, a logbook. But for the first few years, we need to have some structure to hold so that the youth program is fully lived through and there are no shortcuts and skips by the leaders who are new to this and can see this as cumbersome. So though we've given a little more details about the handbooks here, and the slides are in Russian. This is so that the national organizations who came together before the World Conference can see how these things can help them. And I'm going to go. And so, like you see this page on emotional development, it talks about one of the competencies the person is going through. This is for the Scout section. How do I manage my emotions? There are 4 inner compasses. So compass is the symbolic framework here. So some of these things are there to log what the person has done, to analyze emotions, express, to manage, and to, you know, anger management, and all of these. One competency of emotional intelligence or emotional development in scouting. Then going further, you see it gets a little bit more intense. We have the educational objectives coming in so that the child or the young person understands what transformation the activities are bringing in. It's not a worksheet to fill up, but it is mainly reflecting on what program cycle brings in a camp, in a weekly patrol activity, so that they can have this as parallel reference. It's a bit too written, and I wouldn't really encourage that in a well-run machinery of scouting. So we've had several KPIs that we are working towards. It means we are managing now. When Josh came to our regional conference in 2019 September, we had already been 1.5 years into the transition period. So we created a proper strategy, a short strategy for 5 years. Usually strategy should be multiple terms, but things could change dramatically in these. So we kept it for 5 years. We had a new vision to have a youth program in every country and to have a training system. That's all. 2 simple objectives. And so all our KPIs were around that, how to make sure that there are committees on youth program, and to transfer knowledge from other countries, you know, to bring people who are having the quality and talent and interest and time to give to do the knowledge transfer, and also stop all the wrong kind of partnerships, because usually most people partnered with Eurasia region to get free opportunities to travel and have a, you know, check-in in a strange country which you would not get to travel, you know, the Stan countries, or you know, do a nomads camp or a snow camp and live in an igloo. So but that kind of distracted these NSOs. It gave them some money, some recognition, and some travel opportunities, and they got sucked into it and didn't focus on the program. So we said, let's stop doing that. So we really started reaching out to NSOs, European region and Eurasia region, actively engaged to say, please do not distract the NSOs until they put together a youth program and start implementing it using training. So we had to do those kind of work as well to prepare tactics that would enable the strategy. So we are still struggling to finish with youth programs of the countries. We ran workshops with these people for 4 or 5 days, taking them through the documents that we have written, that Dominic had written, and experience them at leadership level, and to tell them how these need to reflect in your own country. So moving on, I'll stop there for a second about youth program and see if you have anything that you want to comment or say. This is a bit detailed into movement building tactics.
I was going to ask a question about
Sure.
some of the youth programs. I mean, many of the countries that you have in your region are developing countries that have, I mean, they have scouting, but they also have a lot of economic and social upheaval going on. How do you see that impact on the programs, the youth programs?
Like all around the world that I have been, coming from Asia, where we have seen similar challenges with corruption and developmental challenges, poverty, all the sustainable goals related issues, environmental damages. And in Africa, what I've seen is that youth program in scouting comes as a panacea. It comes as something that can really help fast track the country's development by preparing value-based young people that are able to really hold the core to bring in the change that is needed for the country, having the right set of mindset and values, and challenging what is being practiced or what are the ills and issues of the society. Which is why a lot of these countries' leadership has started to reflect that, and new leaders are former scouts or people with similar values-based organization experience. Even people are like media and all the basic things are really helping change. And you saw what has happened in Ukraine in recent years, with leadership change, and anybody was welcome as long as you were going to be trying something different and not be following old patterns of corruption and alignment with vested interests, and that really trumped the common man's needs. So the global citizen plus active citizen role of a young person through the youth program really helps people bring that change. So what we prepare as educational proposal, the 2-3 page introduction to the youth program, is talking about that. It is the manifesto of what Scouting wants to do to your young people in your country. And nobody can challenge that, because there's nothing in there that any form of government which is supposed to help young people and people in general to grow and develop as a nation can oppose. Even using creative names, regimes or old school mindsets, kingdoms, and all of those cannot contest what we are trying to do as good. So I personally feel that you having a good youth program is important, and even BSA and India, all of these big countries need to keep renewing to reflect the needs of the modern young people, and that we know how to do that now. Yeah, sometimes we don't do that. Countries don't do that. So James, I don't know if I got your question, but that's what this region is also doing.
I had some experience a few years back with. I was stationed in Kabul with the U.S. government, and I had the chance to interact with the Afghan scouting program there. They would come on to our base once a month or so, and we would do different programs with the youth there. And it was interesting to have both young Afghan girls and boys work together there on our base. And I'm just curious, I know that culturally they're probably going to revert back to some of their previous things, and the programs are probably going to separate for the young women and the young men, which to me, I see that happening in a lot of countries where we have instability. Is the program gets sidelined occasionally on it.
Yeah, well caught, James. There, so that is a reality in which I live in Eurasia. You can do a lot of hard work and handhold people to move forward, and one blow can come and take you backwards. Afghanistan is in Asia Pacific region, not in Eurasia, but still I have worked closely there, and what America and the American NGOs, USAID established PARSA, which led to the formation of the Afghan Scouts, and now struggling. The situation there is terrible. It is no different in Belarus, right. And it is quite similar in a very, very delicate balance in a lot of other countries, and the conflicts between countries in this region makes it so challenging that this region to come together and meet as a jamboree or a conference or anything, I can only go to 3 out of the 9 places that we have as a region, and that is how challenging it is with cross-border problems and recent war between Azerbaijan and Armenia, and putting people in committees and teams to work together with political baggage running in their minds. It's so challenging to advance. So sometimes I feel I'm taking 1 step forward and 2 steps back. But thanks to all the experiences from around the world and having faced some of these conflicts, and I'm a chemical engineer, but I decided to get a master's in development management. So I studied enough about managing in conflicts and war situations. So using that and trusting my instinct, we're working on that. So but a very, very good point
I
about
can't
that,
tell you, Sri.
James.
Srinath, one thing, I mean, I was very fortunate to attend the Eurasia Regional Conference, I think it was now 2 years ago in Kiev, Ukraine, and I saw firsthand, although every NSO was invited, not every NSO was there because of the conflict going on. I mean, just imagine like in the States, you have Sam Houston Area Council and National Capital Area Council, and an event takes place in Dallas, Texas, and NCAC doesn't attend because there's conflict between the two. And this is between countries, obviously. So it was a shame. You know, I'm hopeful that in time, those issues will no longer at least exist in scouting, and you can have people from different countries that attend a regional conference. But it was kind of shocking to see that still exists. And Eurasia, I mean, think about it. Eurasia is the youngest region. It basically formed after the fall of the Iron Curtain and the Berlin Wall. And so, you know, there are still learning curves and growing pains associated with that.
Yeah, I think, Josh, the work has to continue to build the critical mass for the growth of Scout movement. You know, we have to believe that some of these changes will come out of these young people who go through the grind of the Scout movement and who will decide in a moment of war. You know, in ethnic wars in Africa, we've seen people who laid down their swords because the other one they recognized as a scout that they met in a jamboree. You know, and that is what is going to lead it. And I see people already from Azerbaijan and Armenia talking about how they don't like this idea of looking at the other as an enemy, and that's not there in the society. If you see all the other social media posts and everybody there, there is a lot of hatred, and governments propagate it, and leaders come and use that to, you know, for their interest to stay in power. So that's what James was mentioning, that, you know, like in Afghanistan, going back in time is a real reality that can happen. So I can't guarantee that, you know, we'll have in 20 years time a Eurasia region where everybody will be friendly and brothers and sisters. There are big powers here, Russia, and you know, the dramatic and drastic things that happen like Crimea in 2014, you know, they don't help. But the country has the same kind of young people, very bright, wonderful kids in Russia, all over the country, who deserve to be scouts, you know, and who can bring and continue to lead to lots of innovation that's happening in that country. Some amazing tech companies are growing out of Russia. I don't think they align with any of these political interests and war, but we need to reach the program to them and trust the process and leave time to do that part. And that's why we need to believe that scouting really changes the world and creates a better world. And in here we have, you know, it's not very beautiful looking, the work that we are doing, but that work will lead to some of those things that these countries need in the long term. And I believe that all the people coming out of Afghanistan, scouts and guides, the girls and boys out of that, will now help in a long way, despite whoever is in power, whether it's the Taliban or a corrupt government, you know, to bring the change at the community level, you know, and herald those changes that need to come in due course to grow as communities. So I trust and believe in it. I know my time is almost to an end, so I'll not go back to the presentation, but continue to take any questions or comments for the next 5 or odd minutes that I have. I said Dean is that how you pronounce your name? Dean.
Dean.
You unmuted, so any thoughts from there? I'll come back to James if you want to say something later.
Srinath, if I may, yes, you know, something you just said there was really inspiring and thought-provoking in how, you know, scouting changes the world. You've mentioned that, James is talking about, and you have also both talked about, you know, the Afghan scouts and guides. And one of the true magical parts about the Transatlantic Council within the BSA is that we provide a path, a continuous path to the BSA Eagle Award for scouts from all over the country. You know, someone who's, you know, kid grows up in Virginia and then parent gets, you know, transferred private sector, public sector to Germany or London or Dubai, and they can pick up in the middle of their path, and vice versa. And even though all of the NSOs are different, everybody has their own program. It occurs to me just in what you're saying that, you know, maybe scouting can also help create a path for young people in their lives, even when they are moving, when they are displaced. And I'm wondering, putting all of that together, and it's not your region, but I'm wondering if, you know, for instance, the massive wave of movement that we have of Afghans out of Afghanistan now into the United States and several other countries that are taking as the people that are migrating out of Afghanistan, whether they worked with the United States and the UK and other countries in the West, et cetera. I'm wondering if scouting can help those young people with a path of bridging to a new country and continuing something that they were familiar with in their old lives, but in a new path with new NSOs. And I'm wondering, does WUSM help provide, or is it realistically provide bridges for young people moving from one NSO to another? This is the thoughts forming as I say it, but I was very, you know, inspired by what you were saying about, you know, scouting changing the world, and I see in TAC how we build those bridges across countries.
Dean, that's a brilliant idea, and I think it's been experimented a little bit. We have seen in practice in particularly post-war countries where there are refugees and IDPs, that scouting has been used mainly to give some normality and some sense of fun to particularly young children, where we take scouting to their refugee camps, and in Sudan, in all over the world we've done it. It's not only in one place. In Turkey to the Syrian refugees, and everywhere there has been conflict, it has been done. But there is another value of scouting that has been done well in European countries for the older age group as well, across generations of scouts, is the quick integration into the new society they come into. Where they have values and systems that they can quickly absorb and reflect. And if they've been scouts, even wonderful. I mean, we have a guy from Congo, Congo Brazzaville, not Democratic Republic of Congo, who landed up in Russia, who saw that Russian scouting is going downhill, and he started a scout group instantly, with all people from Africa and Arab world who have scouting experience, and started Rover Scouting, set up a scout group overnight. So like that's a very bizarre situation. But what you're talking about can be very well organized, where countries are receiving these new people to help them integrate into the society. Scouting can make a huge difference, because if you go into a classroom, there is most likely a huge shock waiting for you. Not just the quality of education that is different, but that's content, but also all the other ways of life of people. They have their own systems, and you find it a glass ceiling. You can't exit your system. You can't enter there. Every time you talk or you dress or you eat, it is so bizarrely different to the others that you will back off and say, even if you are an extrovert and a socialized guy, you will say, my goodness, that's so tough. So parents can't help there. So in scouting, we see that integration happens much faster. That was my early piece of work, right? Marginalized communities. So bridging gaps, and there is a guidelines that we have written in scouting called Guidelines for Scouting for Children and Young People in Especially Difficult Circumstances. And here the characteristics are the same, whether you're a refugee, you come out as a child soldier, or you've been a child prostitute and child labor. The attributes, the characterisms UNICEF defined of what they go through after that trauma of marginalization is very similar. And scouting can help them build resilience and come back and bounce into, and we call the project a ticket to life. You get a ticket to real life. And that's been done with street children scouting. That was one of my projects, taking it from Africa to Asia. And it's big, and America has supported it a lot. The same terminology, the same concept, the same base can be applied to refugee situation as well. And it's a really good idea to invest on these. James, you wanted to say something? Josh is unmuted.
Tom, I know you had a couple of advanced questions. Did you want to ask any of those that you had sent previously to me?
Yeah, I'll ask one of the questions, but I actually am really intrigued by the conversation that's going on now. So I'll ask the question, but then I'll ask a follow-up comment. and the question really ahead of time that I shared is we're trying to grow our program. We're in about 45 countries, and we'd like to be in about 75 countries in the next 5 years, and including many of the countries in Eurasia where we're just not there. So I was wondering if you could provide us perhaps some, offline, some introductions to international schools or international communities where perhaps a BSA program might help you grow the scouting program. We would certainly be delighted, to have that opportunity. And my comment really is, I really applaud the work that you're doing. You're not just growing scouting in a part of the country, part of the world called the Eurasia, region of the World Organization of the Scouting Movement, but you're really providing hope and inspiration to scout leaders like those on the call and like those that will see this presentation later, because of the work you're doing to provide some of the training. I'm very impressed with the I know I saw the one slide on understanding emotions, understanding how to manage your emotions, understanding how to manage your anger. And so much of the conflicts in today's world happen because we just don't know how to chill out and understand each other and show respect. And I watched an American football game yesterday where a player hit a coach on the opposing side and he was kicked out of the game. But if you looked at the film, the coach actually hit the player first, and he just reacted normally. And wouldn't there been a better way to react, which is to kind of take a step back and really understand what's going on, and not just let your anger get the best of you. So I'd love to learn more about the emotional work that you're doing, the managing emotions. I don't think we really have that in our American Scouting program to the depth that you have. So I'll pause and let you comment.
Thank you for picking that up, Tom. I even mentioned this to Jean when she was, when she took over as the youth program in charge for BSA. I've been around the world, and this is an area that has not been invested. We haven't figured out how to work on this before. I'm also personally invested in a lot of study on psychology and transaction analysis and stuff like that these days to understand how we can bring that into scouting education. I had to really do a lot of work and push people who are also new in this area, because this is something that has not been articulated well. It does happen in BSA, but we haven't learned how to articulate the objectives. Because when your leaders talk to them in the middle of some crisis their child has in a camp, or an issue that the person is going through in their personal life, there is emotional development happening. But we haven't learned how to articulate. And if you don't articulate and register that as a learning, there is no emotional intelligence growth that is happening. If you look at the work of Dr. Daniel Goleman of Howard University on emotional intelligence, this is very new, even in the world. It was in the 90s only that somebody first defined different intelligences. Otherwise, math and science was our intelligence. So Baden-Powell at that time had said that emotional development is a significant other area of development. So we separate that out. I'm very happy to share those materials. They are new. I told you we needed to give them a cutting edge break ahead. But other countries around the world, my own home country, India, looked at it with shock and said, we're going to use it. The European region, the regional director, my close friend Abir, she has taken it to take it back to European countries. So what we're doing in Eurasia, you're right, is an experiment to make a very high quality youth program that is current to today's young people. And it's applicable to across the world. I've been not only in Africa, in Asia, in Inter-America, in Europe, where countries can do with upgrading their youth program. It's a work, it's labor. I'm sending you the link to this for your interest, for the children in especially difficult circumstances document I wrote 16 years ago with a team of volunteers, some of whom have retired from scouting now. But I'll also send you separately through Josh the materials on emotional development and other areas in detail. And it's a good read. It's 600 pages. But if you're really interested in rover scouting particularly, we have a totally new dimension of how to upgrade rover scouting. And a couple of quick slides that I don't think we have time to show. We are having a model rover scouting event next May in Moldova. And that is going to be like nowhere in the world. We are going to start rover scouting already at 9.5 out of 10 and do a huge kickstart, King Rover commissioners, because that's the finishing school of scouting. You start as a young person, but we actually sell the educational proposal as to what a Rover Scout comes out at the end looking like, at the end of it. So we really are going to work on all those things. So you're welcome to come and be part of these things. And I'm very happy, Tom. You've been a true executive director. You immediately picked up what you need in a new region is contacts to the expatriate communities, the Americans and other people in these. And I'm very happy to provide them. Unfortunately, I am also an expat. I thrive on my networks with these communities. The children go to the same ballet schools. And so the embassy staff and all of them are pretty close friends. So, but it's not difficult to reach out to them. I have the networks here and in all these countries. I'm happy to link them up for you. It is important. Your presence here will also help reinforce the local scouting. So happy to work with you on.
Any other questions for Srinath before we move on?
Srinath, just something very quickly. I'm a lawyer by training, and I remember when I was studying international and public law. We were looking. I remember at the end of the when the wall fell, there was an initiative to help the countries of the former Soviet Union create new constitutions, and the initiative was just the same kind of thing that you're doing. It was setting, taking a model of cutting edge, what it would be if you're starting up from scratch, how you would do something that's the best possible way. And I see that echoed in what you're doing in these countries, in using this as almost as a greenfield operation to say, okay, let's take from all around the world what are the best possible reflections of scouting. So it's very inspiring, how you've approached this in looking at the global resources and trying to set the standard at the highest possible level as really a model to the rest of the world. It's very inspiring.
Thank you very much. Thanks everyone. Thanks team for those very kind compliments and for recognizing and valuing the work we're doing here. Sometimes it's difficult when you wake up the next day and people are not interested or not able to take it on here. But we have to be there. We can't be any level less. The cutting edge is the least. So I would thank you for all your time and attention to this. And I'm sure we'll have a lot of opportunities to work together going forward. I also want to thank you to all the integration of ideas that are happening here, waking up to what's happening in Afghanistan, in your own localities. The work that you're doing, I see your agenda is very interesting. My best wishes for you. I also want to take a moment to send my gratitude to a couple of mentors and guides for me who are now leading your organization, particularly Roger Mosby. He coached me and really trained me on how to go from young in that definition, because you only had senior management people above 50 at that time. So I was 35 and I was colored, and we didn't have that kind of a diversity. And he came in and trained me and gave me the sharp skills that were needed to not just sustain, but to thrive and succeed in that environment. So I'm largely benefiting from all of that guidance and support. And he came and supported